Hello, everyone. I'm Jim Garrison, and in the spirit of the trees, the spirit of the aliveness of nature, and in the spirit of our ancestors, I want to greet you today for this session of Humanity Rising, as we day by day and week by week and month by month cover world affairs as they unfold for the benefit of the greater good and the future of humankind. Today, we want to contemplate what Barbara Tuchman would have called a distant mirror for what is happening now in Ukraine. The Russian incursion into Ukraine has captured the world's attention. It's been as much of a shock in many ways as the coming of COVID 2 years ago. And all of us are in a state of consternation. In the last 24 hours, a theater has been bombed and many are feared dead. It's worth just noting for a moment, I read an analyst yesterday who had counted up the bombs that have been dropped by the Russians on Ukraine and the missiles fired and so forth over the last 30 days. They've been at it for more than a month. And it's just worth noting that the United States, in the first 24 hours of the invasion of Iraq, dropped far more weapons, bombs, missiles on Iraq than the Russians have dropped on Ukraine in over a month, with far more people killed. So when we contemplate war, we contemplate the carnage of destruction, we all need to take in that there are many guilty parties in the violence that humankind has been subjected to. And all of us have a deep vested interest, as Chekhov said, drop by drop to squeeze the slave out of ourselves. And today we want to look at what happened in Bosnia, Herzegovina, in the former Yugoslavian republic, actually, which broke up after the collapse of the Soviet Union in the 1990s. The carnage there, the violence there was shocking then as it is today. And so we want to bring that story in and discuss how challenging it is to forge the pathway of reconciliation when violence reigns seemingly supreme and without end as an instrument of state power. So that'll be what we will contemplate today. And we have a Bosnian that will be joining us and an English woman who has been traveling to that part of the world for the last 26 years. But before we engage in that session and contemplation today, let us pause as we always do. And let us just take a moment and close your eyes if you can. And center yourself on your heart. And feel for the next minute or so through your heart all the compassion that you can for all those who are suffering in the Ukraine, who suffered in Bosnia, who suffered in Iraq, Afghanistan, and all the places around the world where violence has been perpetrated. Compassion is what we need to feel. Thank you, everyone. Now I'd like to welcome a good friend and colleague, Annabelle Farnell Watson, who I mentioned in the introduction, who has been a peace activist for many decades and was led 26 years ago during the time of the Bosnian, Serbian, Herzegovinian war that was based on ethnic cleansing. There's many kinds of violence in the world. Some are incursions on sovereignty, and others are incursions of ethnic cleansing, which was the deep strand in that particular conflict. And Annabelle went over there with a number of other peace activists. She's been there ever since. She met our other speaker today, Vyacheslav Saye, who worked for Mercy International for a number of years, and then helped to co-found the International Religious Council of Bosnia and Herzegovina, and has been tirelessly working on reconciliation. And will be giving us a report. Both Annabelle and Vyacheslav will be giving us a report of how they experienced both the conflict there and what it's been like to bring reconciliation out of the violence that ensued. So Annabelle, I want to welcome you. Annabelle will tell her story, and then she will introduce Vyacheslav, and he will give us a report on what is going on over there and the experience of the war in the late 1990s and what's been happening subsequently. And then I'll circle back and we'll have a dialogue. So thank you, everyone. And Annabelle, welcome. Tell us your story.
Hi, Jim. I feel so honored to be on this amazing platform that you've kept going every day for, was it over 400 days? Something amazing. And I so admire your wonderful passion and tenacity, and you never give up. May I learn from that. And I very much wanted to use this extraordinary platform that reaches so many thousands of people to tell a little about what's going on in Bosnia today, because it gets forgotten. It gets forgotten, the next crisis comes up and the world rushes on to the next one. And of course, what's happening in the Ukraine is simply terrible. And of course, but then the things that are happening in other places get overlooked. And Bosnia originally in that war, the international world acted far too late, and so many thousands of them were killed. And I just don't want it to be forgotten. And so this is why I asked Jim if I could invite a Bosnian to talk about what's going on today. But I got involved in this by becoming part of a peace initiative called Through Heart to Peace. And it was started by a young then Bosnian woman, this called Emsuda Mujagic, and a Croatian woman. And I happened to get involved because I was part of a group of people who had made a place of encouragement. It was a big property in Devon, and we were so aware of this war raging so close to us in Yugoslavia. And we just wrote rather hopefully, look, we have this lovely place. It's helped people often. And can it do anything for you? And after a while, we got it was a fax in those days, saying, would you take some children who are shattered by this war and give them some respite? And they asked us to take 16 children. And we willingly did this. And they came, and we very much wanted them to represent each of the ethnic groups, which was a bit romantic of us because no Serbians could possibly have come. But because we asked for it to be a mixed group, it encouraged the Croatian woman who was in touch with us to go and look for some Bosnians who were, that time, Zagreb I think its population was almost doubled, with Bosnians living in garages and sheds and small rooms and things all over Zagreb. And so she managed to meet with someone called Sharifa Halilovic, who helped her get a mixed group together. And they came, and it was the most amazing experience to have them. And out of that, while we were busy with them, we were also trying to run a small hotel at the same time around them. We got an urgent message coming from someone, from this Croatian woman and this Bosnian woman she'd met called Emsuda Mujagic. And both these women had been told divinely that they needed to do something about this war. And both their stories were extraordinary. And that women had to do something and women could make a difference. So they got in touch with us and said, we're starting this peace initiative and we need you. Please come. Well, they didn't really see what we could offer, but Gillian Keane, who was very instrumental in all of this, said, well, we'll go just once and see if we can do anything. So 5 of us got in a car and drove out to Zagreb to the beginning of this peace initiative. And we found that we became very central to the whole thing because there had been some bombs dropped on Zagreb just the days before. And not very many international people were there. And when Emsuda stood up and told the story of how she'd been moved to start this peace initiative, it was such an extraordinary, magical story. And I don't know, Jim, if I have time to tell the story now, but we then knew that's why we were there and that we wouldn't be coming once. And we went back and forth every other month at that point, trying to keep this peace initiative alive, because the second time we went, it had almost died. And there were only about 5 of us together, sitting in a very cold little room. And the Bosnians were saying, we can't do it. It's not going to work. We can't do it. And it was a bit like going to a fire that was just, the embers were just going out. And there were 3 Germans and 5 English, I think. And we just blew on this fire with them and it came alight. And the next meeting, we had 140 people. And that's where it took off. And finally, at that point, we couldn't actually get into Bosnia. So all our meetings were held just outside Zagreb in a little place called Samobor. But finally, we managed, we had some buses, Croatian buses, and we set off towards Sarajevo. And we got as far as Medjugorje for the night. And there were 140 of us. And in the night, all our bus drivers disappeared. They just ran away. So we were stuck in Medjugorje with all these people stumping about, and people on peace initiatives actually can be very unpeaceful, which was rather astounding to learn. But finally, Msuda got onto the radio, and she was heard by the transport minister in Sarajevo, who sent out 3 of their remaining buses to fetch us. They said, these people have to come. It was quite extraordinary. And so these buses came, and they had broken windows and all sorts of things. They weren't in very good condition, but that didn't matter. And we set off towards Sarajevo, towards Mount Igman. And when we got to the top of Mount Igman, the bus driver said, you will have to lie on the ground, and we've got to turn the bus lights out, and we're going down towards Sarajevo. We went to a little town just across from the airport outside Sarajevo, and charged down the mountain in the dark in the night. And then we were put up in the town hall on rugs and things. And in the morning, this little town woke up to find all these foreigners in their midst. And it was in such Bosnian style. They all rushed out with coffee and welcomed us, and most extraordinary welcome. And then we were able to make a dash across the airport that day and into the middle of this town under siege. And I think it's one of the most moving things I've ever done in my life. And we repeated that several times during the war. And through Heart to Peace, people would say, what do you do? It wasn't so much about doing, it was about being. And we said we come in friendship to stand with our fellow humans. And I felt so proud to be part of this. It was such a lovely thing. And it was amazing what effect that had on people. And so finally, eventually, Msuda, who came from a town called Kozarac in the north of Bosnia, had always wanted to hold a conference in her town, and it looked impossible because it was totally besieged. Finally, we managed to hold it there. And after many, many years of going there, I think I'd gone 26 years without a break before we were all locked down here. And that's the only thing that has stopped us going. And we're going again this year to Kozarac and to support this. So it was at this little conference that Msuda used to get together every May on the date that the town was besieged, that I met Vjeko and his wife Azra. And they've been a very important part. Vjeko speaks wonderful English, as you'll discover, which was very important to us because we were terrible at learning Bosnian. And we've held these wonderful, very enlightening conferences, and we're going to have another one this year. And I was really so glad that Vjeko agreed to do this with Jim, because what to me is so important now is that people know what's actually happening in Bosnia now, because it's really looks very bad. And I can't bear the thought that these people are going to be faced yet again with the world turning their back and with being attacked and by the Serbian nationalists. And I think, I don't know if I'm correct in this, but Russia is probably behind this. And we know what this can lead to. And so I really wanted Vjeko to tell you about today. And I'm so happy he could be here with us. And hello, Vjeko, I can't see you. I can't see any pictures at all. But so Vjeko has been working very hard, as Jim said, on many projects and major projects with reconciliation and conflict transformation. And I think there's very much a focus with the younger generation. And my feeling is that we must reach the next generations to let them know what's happening in their world. And there is so much happening that it's so easy to get overwhelmed, and a place like Bosnia not to be recognized and to be forgotten. So happily, Vjeko's here, and he will be able to tell you. And I hope that people will, despite all the rest of the awful things that are happening, give some focus to Bosnia and support them. because they're very much needed. Thank you, Jim. Can I introduce Vjeko now, who I'm so happy to see. I haven't seen him, since lockdown? What's that, 3 years, 4 years?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Welcome, everybody.
Ezra's there too. Yeah, hi, Ezra.
Yeah, I mean, you suggested, and I just told Azra, oh, yes, of course, why not? She can join the discussion because she
Very
was
much.
with me on many projects since.
Yes, welcome.
Yeah, hello.
So glad to see you, Annabelle, and also Jim for another time. And also, I managed to contact you with Irvin, our young representative from our projects, Irvin Kernovic. He's under Jim's name. Anna, now he's under Irvin's name.
Oh, there he is.
Irvin.
Oh, good.
Irvin, welcome. Welcome.
Thank you so much. It's nice to meet you.
Irvin was participating in many of our projects and dealing with reconciliation and working with young generation in schools and teachers. So he can also give his own view and picture about what happened before and what is coming up next after this terrible news that we are receiving from Ukraine.
Yes. Well, what I suggest is a good way to begin, Vyacheslav and everyone. First, just remind everybody about the war and what happened in the 1990s, with the breakup of Yugoslavia and Serbia and Bosnia and some of the geostrategic issues, so people have a sense of what happened. We don't want to take too long because we want to talk more about the reconciliation and the pathway to peace. But I think it's important for everybody to understand the context within which Annabelle and Gillian and others went over there, and you had been working, and even and so forth. So maybe Vyacheslav, you could start that way, and we can unfold the discussion from there.
Yeah, it is difficult to get to the point where you can start, but basically what caused the war in Balkans was the long history of aspiration of Serbia to become a great Serbia. And during the ex-Yugoslavia, during Tito's Yugoslavia, that dream was somehow kept in a bottle, and it was not possible for this dream to be performed and executed. But when Tito died, and after maybe 10 years of this period when we didn't know whether we are heading to democracy or not, some forces prepared the war, but basically ordinary people were not aware of that. Most of people didn't expect that we would have such a terrible war in 90s. And that's the problem of people being naive. I always say why I was so naive, and my wife and my friends, why we didn't see the signs sooner enough. But still, what we could do if we don't have arms. And most of us are also frustrated by the fact that now this war that we had is by many media and politicians is considered as civil war. But basically, it was not a civil war. And Annabelle also can confirm that, and Irvin, because me and my wife, we didn't have arms. We were paying for Yugoslav army to be an army, as they told us always and in schools, to protect us from the foreign and internal enemy for the defense. But it suddenly became the army of Serbia. And of course, in that time, a regime in Serbia was under Milosevic, and his dream was to actually transform ex-Yugoslavia into something like a big Serbia. And then Croatia and Slovenia didn't accept this idea, and Bosnia then stayed in the open. And we also then made the referendum, which was very successful. And that is another frustration that we have, that this referendum, in spite of being one of the best referendums regarding results, it was more than 90% of people who actually participated in a referendum, which was also 65% of all the population. And we actually voted for independence country. But then the arms started to be implemented. I didn't hear, Jim. Yes?
Just as a reminder, what year was this?
That was 92.
92.
90,
Okay.
actually, 91 was the referendum, and 92 the war started. But we were recognized by UN at the same time when Croatia was recognized. And then the terrible things started to happen, and we couldn't do anything but going to defend our cities. And I was digging trenches like all my fellows from Sarajevo and in many other cities. But people in villages started to have the first actually experiences of terrible carnage and massacres. And then concentration camps have been established, and we later, when the war finished, we visited together with Annabelle many of these sites, which prove that it was really planned much more in advance.
Yes. And you're Muslim, right?
Actually, I sent you a message, but maybe you didn't. I'm actually a Roman, traditionally Roman Catholic, but basically I'm agnostic, and my wife is Muslim tradition, and she is also agnostic.
Because that was one of the...
And Irvin also may say about him. Irvin.
So I'm actually a mix of almost both. So actually my mother is a Orthodox and my father is a Muslim. So I'm kind of raised in a mixed household with different cultures.
But I wanted to raise that because that was part of the complexity.
Exactly.
What happened. It was both Serbian, Croatian, national and ethnic, but it was also religious. It was a very complicated conflict. So speak to that, and Madam, you may have a point of view on that, since that is your heritage.
Well, we had a life before the war, like what I will say now, like Sweden, like Switzerland. We have socialism, but it was not kind of what Russia has or Czechoslovakia in that time. So it was Tito's time, but we had a very free time. We can travel. For example, I used to travel even in 45 countries without visa. You can imagine if you're comparing with the communism in Russia or in Czechoslovakia and other countries from the East, they couldn't do anything. They couldn't go anywhere. So we just were sitting in the home, we drinking, and we immediately saw that the grenade is coming, shell, and we didn't know what's going on because nobody of us except that war will start. And Sarajevo was completely in that times, maybe 1 month, the tanks and everybody go around to the mountain.
As a preparation. So very similar as now the war started in Ukraine. First, the army was actually being concentrated close to the border, and then even Ukrainians didn't expect that to happen. It suddenly started.
So, and the 2nd of May 1992, we lost electricity. All our important building was burned. Library, National Library, Post Office, all these buildings, important, where is the people are working, and business center, everything. And the same day, everything. And after a few days, we lost water, so we didn't have electricity and water
Wow.
And gas supply.
and gas supplies. And maybe in a few days, everything is gone. So 4 years, I'm going and searching for the water, electricity, nothing, instead of candles. Since my husband and we traveled before war a lot, we love candles. So, and in my house, we have a lot of candles.
Collection of candles, yes.
Except only one. I keep one even now. It was the remembering for a very good friend in Iraq, because we used to work as architect in Iraq, in Baghdad. So I keep only that even now, that candle, you can imagine. And after that, we use oil and many, things. But
You improvise, you
but,
just
but
improvise.
water is very important. For example, when the rain is coming, we cut the gutter,
Gutter,
the gutter.
yeah.
gutter, and we collect in some pot. We collect water because we need to wash our clothes, and we need to wash us. We put some bottled water and put on the roof to be warm, because we don't have electricity, nothing. We have small oven when we cooked on
Old books and
whatever we have,
shoes,
and
rubber.
No
That's-
kidding.
And
That's-
basically, probably now the people in Ukraine, in this surrounded city, are
Doing the same thing. Doing
Yes.
the same thing.
And
Yes.
what I heard from one lady that who is a refugee, she said, "We were yesterday in a shopping center and coffee bar, and now we are refugees." And
that's happened with us
that's
also.
happened with
So
many
we are
people.
drinking wine in my nice house with the roof, watching on the building, and immediately we saw something, coming,
Missiles.
missile, and we said, "Oh, that must kill us. Let's go to the basement." So every day we are in the basement, but you need to come up to do some for the food and search for
And
the food.
wash and
And you were in Sarajevo? Was that where you?
yes, we were in Sarajevo.
Yeah, so you were on the front line, because
Exactly,
Sarajevo
yes.
was under siege and attacked.
Yes.
And
And,
yes.
and
But you know what also happened? Some parts of Sarajevo were occupied by Serbian and Yugoslav army. So for us, being under siege was even better than being in these occupied areas, because once it is occupied, people who were not of Serbs were taken to the concentration camps or were just killed. And those who were not killed were actually working in for some things, and like slaves, and most of the women were raped. And there is a very good movie, Grbavica, about one area of Sarajevo which was occupied, and where woman actually was raped, and then she had a child from that rape, and the movie is about that.
So child go to the school after the war, and
She didn't know that she was
mother never said to her who is the father, but she always asked, "Where is my father? Where is the graves for him?" It was very, very difficult movie,
and finally she realized that
she realized, and she said to her the truth.
Now, did you have children at that time?
yes, our daughter was with us all the time. She was 13, 14 years old in that period, and she was, she's tried to live normal life with her peers. She would play in the shelter, then they would sometimes go outside, and it was the biggest worry when children go outside, because it was very dangerous.
And we every day have to go to our job. Both of us, architect, and also other people go, like probably Irving can say, like her father. Everybody is going, have some duty. It was not a duty in that period For example, we as architect, we keep our drawings,
Our files and
files,
everything.
but we have to come there.
Because we wanted to show the enemy that we want to continue
Mm.
with normal life. That was the main point.
And all our theater also, we went to theater, but theater is noon, 12 o'clock, never in the night, but we managed.
And you know, our actors even managed to organize the hair, musical hair in
Ah.
the theater.
Oh,
And-
hair.
Yeah, yes.
It was amazing, you know.
That's
So
fantastic.
that at the moment, or 1 hour, 2 hours to be in that, we just didn't, we just left our, you know, things and come to the theater to be just normal,
Right.
few hours.
Yeah.
You know, I remember at the time being horrified at the way that the Serbians used snipers.
Yeah,
Oh,
sorry.
that was maybe the worst feeling that we had in the war.
Yeah,
Yeah, you're
yeah.
right.
Tell us about that part of it.
Oh.
You know, I was actually first time I realized that I was a target. In that particular moment, it was not even sniper, but I was a target on the street of Sarajevo. One anti-aircraft gun was shooting around me. And I didn't even know what was that, you know. And I just saw fire around me. Fortunately, I was not hit, but basically I was a target of anti-aircraft gun, and fortunately survived. But later on, we would just walk the street, and then you hear something that is hitting close, and then you just jump down or you crawl, and
You know, all these 4 years we are running. At maybe after 1 month, I lost 16 kilo.
Wow.
because when you run, you
Running,
think
I running all the
Okay.
time on the street.
when you run, you just think less, and you think that it will not hit you, but maybe
But
you can
s-
even
but-
get to the
Yeah.
bullet.
So we
You never
never
know.
we never go together, me and Vieko, thinking somebody can be alive if something happens with another. you
Yeah,
know.
and we would choose our own way, our own path to the city, you know.
Yeah. Yeah. Now,
For example, I
even
would never suggest Azra go this way. She would decide about
Yeah.
her way.
and even I'll bring you in a second, but just to round this out a little bit, how would you describe during those 4 years, given the fact that, like so many people, we know it's inevitable, but we're not prepared for when it really happens? How would you describe your psychological and emotional responses, and how did you support one another? How did your community support one another? How did you survive sort of in your heart during this time?
You know, it was somehow we developed very good relations with neighbors. For our apartment building, we are kind of proud that most of the mixed families and different nationalities and religions, we still live together as it was before the war. In our particular case, it didn't happen that neighbor was killing neighbor, you know. But we were all against the evil that was surrounding us, because I would never blame all the Serbs for doing this to us. And later, even Croatian forces, Annabelle knows that too. Croatian forces had some aspirations to take one part of Bosnia for themselves.
Mm.
But basically, I always say there is a good and evil in the war.
So,
And we have to
yeah.
find a way to discourage and fight evil.
So we share everything with the neighbors. For example, long time we didn't see apple. For example, if somebody find and bring apple, we share apple. We share onion. I remember we share onion, and all these things. Even when we got help from čega, Amperfor, ko nam je dao pomoć prvu?
Caritas was the first to give.
To give some flour, some rice, oil, but very, very small, you know.
And then UNHCR got into the picture, and they would bring humanitarian aid.
Yeah.
But it was really for 1 month you would get 1 liter of oil or something.
So we are always
for whole
in
family.
Each building has a own, you know, man or woman who is taking care about us, and we are online waiting for that small half liter of oil, 1 kilo rice, and 1 kilo flour.
And we would also grow. Fortunately, we had some green area behind our apartment building, so we would grow tomato. It was next summer, actually, of the war. We would grow tomato and potato, but it was very small quantity, of course.
But
Can I say something? I'd like to
Yes.
talk about the generosity that we met with as this bunch of people coming into this besieged city. And we expected to sleep on the floor and eat a few pieces of stale bread. Far from it. We were given the best bed, the best sheets, any bit of ration left over. It was absolutely unbelievable, the love and the generosity that we were received with. They are such beautiful people.
So even
What
in the
is
midst of
important-
the deprivation,
Yeah,
Yeah.
their generosity was
it never
extraordinary.
ceased. Yeah.
I don't know, Irvin, if you have some stories of your parents. Your father worked at TV building, I think, at that time.
Yes, Ivan, tell us the story of the war as you experienced it through your parents.
Yes, so I was thankfully happy that I didn't have a chance to live specifically in this era, but my parents were inside a besieged Sarajevo. So my father had a lot of stories, and so did my mother. Apart from them, I also have an older brother who was born in 1992. So he grew up in the bomb shelters. He grew up watching various things. So the stories that our father always told us were they always try to find happiness in all of those situations. So there are stories where they were almost killed, or they saw some shelling coming towards them, or seeing some people or soldiers walking in front of them. And all they tried to do in these moments was forget about it. So as Vyacheslav said, in that period, people were trying to be together and be connected. So the stories that my father managed to tell me is that all the neighbors were living together, similarly to sharing all the food, trying to make some good or kind memories, even though it was a bad place to be in at that moment. So there's a lot of sad stories as well. There's a lot of also as fun stories where they would try to go really fast throughout the snipers and listen to music, or go out with dogs and similar to that. So I think positively regarding the whole war situation, it connected a lot of people. Even though it separated people, it made a good connection between family and between the neighbors as well.
Mm. You know, and it's worth noting, everyone, that the perpetrator of all this, Milosevic, president of Serbia, was charged with war crimes.
Yeah.
And crimes against humanity. This was not
Exactly.
just an ordinary conflict. This was a conflict that descended into the abyss of war crimes.
Exactly.
So this is what these folks were surviving as they lived out their lives and shared their tomatoes and their apples and their onions. And as you say, Ivan, tried to both forget and to live life in the midst of the rubble.
Yeah, we shouldn't allow to lose hope. You know, in the worst situation, you shouldn't lose hope, and that's what is driving you forward.
But we are very tired. 1995, we are very tired about water, no electricity, no food. It was unbelievable situation. But for me, is more difficult situation when my Irma, my daughter, crossed the tunnel and go outside. It was 1995 August. It was almost the end of war.
But we didn't know.
But we didn't know. We have a cousin in Austria, So he said, please bring Irma if you couldn't come, because for us it's forbidden to go out. You don't have permission to go. Only way to go out, it was the tunnel which Bosnian army built during these years.
Under the runway of airport.
Yeah. So, so finally we decided, and my friend, actually, Serb friend, helped me for my Irma. So in that time, Vjeko is working with Amperfor, but he couldn't put her in that vehicle. She needs to go through the tunnel alone. She was 13 years old. I was so scaring. And the man said, okay, come, and that time, 4 o'clock, that and that. Vjeko on the other part, he was out of Sarajevo. It was the mountain Igman, and he supposed to wait there, but he doesn't know when and where and nothing.
So it was the longest day of my life, waiting for Irma to get out of Sarajevo, because with the UN vehicle, I was able to go on the other side of the tunnel. And then we decided that I would take her to Italy and then to Austria. So we managed, but the journey was very difficult, dangerous, and we were climbing mountains, hitchhiking on the road, facing different armies, and after 3 days we got from Sarajevo to Split and managed to get to the ferry and to Italy. Fortunately, we had friends in Florence, Italian friends, so we stayed there for some 10 days, trying to get visa for Irma to get to Austria. But unfortunately, in Austrian consulates and embassies in Italy, they required her to go back to Sarajevo to get visa, because you can get visa only in a domicile country. So it was crazy, and then I telephoned my cousin in Austria, and we agreed that he and his wife would come to Italy at the border, and they put her in a trunk and smuggled her to Austria.
Wow. That's the story. But it was the long day. This man who is taking her to the tunnel, he said to me, he can call my brother, because I don't have here telephone, nothing. And I will just say packets is
arrived.
Packet arrived, yes.
Anything.
But in that moment when I had to leave my daughter, I thought I would never, because I went back to Sarajevo under siege. So I was not sure if I would ever see my daughter,
Wow.
It was a very difficult moment.
Yes.
So, but it was good that she come back, of course, and she was later.
She spent 2 years in Austria, finished high school, and then she decided to come back.
So she's a designer, and she has one son, and she married with one Belgian guy.
Well, good. Well,
knows that.
let's turn our attention to the aftermath of the war, because that's really where the story begins. And Ivan, you come in as well. As you grew up, you're part of the aftermath, the reconciliation that inevitably needs to take place in the aftermath. But let's start at the beginning. So describe just a little bit about how the war ended. There was the intervention of NATO and the United States at that time, and the war ended. And tell us about what was that like, that transition from being under siege, being under the snipers' guns, and then all of a sudden there was an uneasy peace, and you had to look around and realize that there was absolute devastation. Tell us how that unfolded and the pathway that you took with Mercy International and the International Religious Council, etc.
Yeah, actually, at that moment when the peace came, whatever Dayton is, and it's not a perfect agreement, but we for at least had a peace. And then we were encouraged by realizing that so many people of goodwill and organizations started to come. At the same time, Annabelle was coming to Mostar first, and I met some people from Mercy International in Sarajevo, and they offered me and Azra immediately a job. So it was another good thing that we were able to earn some money because our companies were destroyed. And then we started to do projects with them, and many people started to work with internationals. And we were all so optimistic about our country and that everything will be much better in future. And now we cannot say the same thing at this point because we are going in circles of, but real reconciliation unfortunately didn't happen. We don't have war, but we are still struggling about this ethnicities and democracy and different interpretations of democracy. But during the time with Mercy Corps, we had wonderful projects of interreligious dialogue with the religious leaders and also reconstructing of different cities, bringing economy back. And Mercy Corps International really made great work in different fields. One of my tasks was very interesting at the beginning, was to bring, try to negotiate with the Serb Orthodox bishop to come back to Sarajevo again, because he was on the so-called enemy side near Sarajevo all time during the war. But the basic idea of our religious leaders in Sarajevo, Muslims, Catholics, and Jews, was to try to bring Orthodox priest, Orthodox bishop to Sarajevo, and to start first workshops about dialogue and the forming of interreligious council. And it was supported by Mercy Corps International and also by Religions for Peace. And also some United States ambassador, Swanee Hunt, who was ambassador in Vienna at that time, but she helped a lot. So my task was to go to Sokolac near Sarajevo on Serbian side to try to negotiate with bishop to come. And for me, at that moment, it was like going to the moon, you know, I mean, you go to the enemy lines, you know. And but I said, okay, I will try what I can do. So I went with my own car alone to this remote place near Sarajevo and found somehow the house of the bishop. I knocked on the door, and two priests, his helpers, opened the door, and I told them what my mission was, and they accepted me, and they said, okay, we'll talk to the bishop. And then bishop asked me if I could stay for a lunch. I accepted lunch and brandy and everything. And can you believe that the same day he accepted to go with my car to Sarajevo and
Come back.
to come back later after the meeting. So I took him to the meeting with a Muslim leader, with a Jewish leader, and a Roman Catholic leader. And that was the first meeting. After that, we had series of meetings, and they formed Interreligious Council of Bosnia and Herzegovina after maybe 2 months, 3 months of negotiations.
Mm.
So that was maybe one of my big achievements at that part, that part of the post-war period.
And Azra, what did you do? Did you just continue to be an architect? Did you?
No, I stopped my job as architect. I was working 20 years as architect. So I start also, I joined the Mercy Corps International. I was office manager. So I had a chance to meet many people. So we thinking to organize something, what will happen to our city and our Bosnia. So the one lady who came with one group, it was Bobby Hauser. Her husband was 1 year here in Sarajevo with the army, you know, US, as instructor actually. So she came to visit him, and she come to Mercy Corps, and we start to discuss, and she said, well, I have idea. I was teacher, and I would love to have some kind of activities with the children. So we somehow managed to have a summer friendship summer camp. So we start that camp with 1999. You
And
can
and
imagine.
Mercy Corps actually supported that project.
And yeah, Mercy Corps supported that project. So we working with Bobby Hauser and all his team almost more than 22 years, because when Corona came, we stopped.
But we are still in contact, and they still help some of the activities.
So last camp was 2019.
And actually later on, when Irvin became a teenager, he became our also part of interpreter and part of our projects.
So
also,
Ivan, I can say something about my women. Since we have our cities with so many displaced persons and so many refugees from Srebrenica, from east part of Bosnia. And most of these women lost husband or brother or son, whatever. So one guy from America also wants to do something with that women. So we somehow establish Hands Raised Together, actually small non-profit organization for the embroidery and all this stuff.
Liturgical stuff.
Liturgical stuff. The women knows how to do that. From 7 years old, I do that embroidery and many things. So that project was so successful, and
it is still
we have some going on of this type.
It is called Sarajevo Phoenix, and I think Annabelle saw some of the products of these women.
I think Annabelle saw.
Lovely stuff.
So Ivan, you were born in the aftermath of the war. Just tell us about that. What was it like to be born when and how you were, and tell us your pathway and getting involved in reconciliation, and just tell us your story.
So it was really weird, I think.
When were you born? When were you born?
I was born in 1999. So
that's
it was
after
4 years after, I think, the war. So I was born right after the economy was a little bit better. It wasn't perfect at that time, but the system was working somehow. So I don't have that much memory of specifics or situations, but I remember that we had a lot of shelled buildings and bullet holes in schools, in other buildings where we would walk. There was always destroyed structures, or architecture was really, really weird at that period. So I grew up in one part of the city, I was raised in the city of Sarajevo, which was the capital. And we need to say that after the war, during the Dayton Agreement, the whole country was divided in two. So it was divided into the Federation of Bosnia, which was the Bosnian side, or as people call it, the Muslim side. And the other was the Republic of Srpska, which was the Orthodox. And you also have District Brčko. And this caused the huge difference in between the country, where people wouldn't accept, for example, people from Federation in the Republic, or the opposite. So I was raised in the Federation, and it was a little bit difficult at the beginning, because it was really the hatchet wasn't buried yet. Even now it isn't buried yet. So when I was going into the school or during my childhood, because of my mixed culture, it was a little bit difficult. I didn't fit in immediately because I was considered, for example, a Serbian, even though I was raised in the capital or inside of the Sarajevo, or even though that my father was a Bosnian. So it was difficult for people similar to me, which there was a lot of people who came from the mixed household. So it was difficult to start, but after a little bit of time, a lot of the children and teenagers, they stopped thinking so much about war because all the older generations kept pushing it, and they kept arguing, and even some children learned from their parents to hate or to segregate even more, even though it was happening. So I think it was in my high school year where I started working with Vjeko and Azra with one of the camps. It was in the Bosnia International Servant Trip. It was run by the New Jersey Synod, and they would do different camps, and it was really, really important personally because it was necessary to work actively through the education of youth and to encourage them to not live in a segregated way. So there was a lot of schools who were under the same roof, but separated into two. So for
Right.
example, one school was like a Catholic Christian school, but the other side was considered like a Muslim gymnasium or something like that. So it was, for those children, it was incredibly difficult. They were pushed apart from, even though they were in the same building, they knew it was us and them. So it wasn't they weren't together. They were physically in the same place, but on the other hand, they were really, really different and apart. Even some teachers said when a couple of years ago, when people were fighting to stop the segregation in schools, one of the teachers said, you cannot combine apples with pears. You cannot mix those two in the same pot. So that was incredible not to, people were really shocked by that, especially because it was the teacher who was teaching the children the difference and the segregation. So what Vjeko and Azra had been doing all these years, so after the war, they were bringing different cultures closer together. So for example, those schools, even us as interpreters, it was a chance for me to meet a lot of interpreters from Republic of Srpska. They had a chance to meet interpreters from Federation. So it was connecting children, it was connecting adults, it was connecting people who worked. So it was really incredible and beautiful. So later on, inside of those schools, they tried to unite different children and their cultural backgrounds into doing some arts, some activities where they had to work together. So in that way, they would learn to work together, and they would start the peace and reconciliation, which was important for younger people, especially my generation and the older generation. So those deep conflicts that weren't resolved, they ended up being pushed onto the children. And Vjeko and Azra and the workshops and a lot of people similar to them, they were trying to achieve minimizing the separation. They tried to push people to work together. It's an incredible experience. It's really difficult to put it into words because it fills a lot of people's hearts deeply, because we stopped thinking about other people as enemies or as friends. We start thinking them like family. So it's almost as living together. So it's really difficult to look at the borders of Bosnia and to see there's the political divide, there is the segregation in the culture, there is the segregation in the schools, there is segregation everywhere. But currently the situation is good and bad at the same time. So there's still some older people or people who served during the war, and they still have issues with the refugees. So I think the biggest reason why the reconciliation had issues was a lot of refugees had to come back to live in Bosnia and to live with their enemies. There were three sides who lived apart, and they fought for 4 to 5 years. And the war, when it ended, they had to come back to live together. So it was really, really difficult for them to start. So thankfully, we have people like Vjeko and Azra who push the youth and the elders to start the reconciliation. So I really thank them.
You make us cry.
And even one of the reasons, I'm currently a bachelor in psychology and I'm on my master's studies. And one of the reasons I study this is because of Vjeko and Azra, and it is because of the reconciliation part, because there's a lot of traumatic experience going on in a lot of people. There's even children being born with, for example, post-traumatic stress disorder or syndrome. even though they weren't inside of the war. The
Yeah.
adults and the teachers push their thoughts and views on them. So it's really important to educate them and to start from the smallest point of view, which is from the children. They are born not knowing the difference. They're born not they're born to accept everyone. In the playground, you see children playing without any ethnic background, with every color, any name, any age. So they accept everyone. And it's so sad to see in school that they can't do that because of the teachers or because of the government. So thankfully, I think we're going towards that because the younger generations are more accepting, but there's still unresolved conflicts. There's still, the hatchet wasn't buried. There's still some issues in between the people.
And are the schools still segregated?
There are still some schools that live under the same roof. They're still segregated, but the children, even though the school is segregated, more children are going outside together, or there's more friendships than it was before. Yeah. Because before they didn't have any chance.
After class is over.
After classes, yes. Exactly. Even though they can't be inside class together, they're separated. So even that system, the two schools under the same roof, it started as a chance for refugees to come back, because it gave a chance for enemies to live back inside of their own homes. But because of that, they didn't have any way to push them to come here. So they said, okay, you can come here. Your children can go into the school. It can be a Croatian school or a Catholic school. We can move us from them. And the adults were like, okay, so my child won't be bullied. There won't be anything similar to that. So it's okay, we might come back. But it brought some more issues and some more unresolved parts. But we even did some camps with Vieco and Azra. They did camps in some of those schools. And you could see children doing those things together, playing together, working together to achieve a certain goal. So it's really beautiful to see that even the buildings and even the people are pushing them, some will come back together.
Remarkable. Azra, Vyacheslav, what would you add to Ivan's story?
Well, I can tell you one story about segregated school. We had one seminar with Bonnie Miller, former ambassador's, United States ambassador wife. She organized with Bobby Hauser many seminars around schools. And in one school in Stolac, which is Croatian and the Bosnian Muslim school, under two schools under one roof, I was actually also translating some of the stuff. And then one Croatian teacher, she sent a message to Bonnie Miller, who was American, and she asked me to translate. And basically the teacher, lady teacher said, I don't understand the language that interpreter is speaking, meaning she didn't understand my language. But basically our languages are so similar. There are basically, it is one language with differences like American and English language. Mm-hmm. But this teacher wanted to show her ethnicity at the worst possible way, you know. And then Bonnie Miller just said, I live here for a long time and I know differences of your language, and your language is less different than American and British English, because I also teach in some schools in Britain. So she shut her
She left
mouth.
After that.
And she couldn't stand.
She couldn't stand.
So you can see how serious problem with some of the teachers. And can you imagine these teachers teaching children?
Yeah, that's very difficult. What Irvin said, it was for us, it's mission when the kids come from they are in the same school from one roof, but they have different curriculums, education. And some of the teacher want to say, look, this is my class, can we go together all? And we said, oh, excuse me, we need to mix them. So nobody knows who is a Croat, who is Muslim, who is Serb.
Because we put name tags and colors. And
some name tags, nothing. And different colors, yellow, blue and red. So somehow kids be together. They realize they know each other maybe visually, but they never play together.
Right,
That
exactly.
was summer camp.
This is the first step to some kind of normality.
Yeah.
Annabelle,
you wanted to add something?
I understood that they were actually taught different history, and that's the worst
that's
part.
the problem too. Yes.
Yeah, they have
Definitely. There's some schools
it all
that.
goes on. Yes, sorry.
Yeah.
Please continue. I'm sorry.
What were you going to say?
So exactly as Miss Annabelle said, so there's history being taught differently for specific schools, or they don't even teach anything about the war. They try to push it down. For example, I had an experience in my primary school where there was a little bit about the war. It was just when it started, when it ended, and the Dayton Agreement, nothing else. So some teachers wanted, apart from the curriculum, to add real stories, real experiences to that. But as Miss Annabelle said, there's schools that teach them that one side started the war, some people say the other side started the war, and it even caused more segregation.
Yeah.
Was there any process at a national level or multinational level around truth and reconciliation as happened in South Africa, for example? Or were all these attempts at reconciliation private, local, sort of grassroots like you're describing? Was there any national Truth and Reconciliation Commission or anything?
No, it didn't happen. But maybe this formation of interreligious council did something, because these people really were willing to cooperate. And for example, if some incident would happen in one area of Bosnia, they would all go together to actually somehow give a hope and give some ideas to people to stay in that area which was under some kind of aggression.
So as we bring this to a close, I would love to have each of you comment on what's happening now in Ukraine. And based on your experience of what you went through, what not only would be your comment on what's going on, but what advice or what consolation would you extend to the Ukrainian people, and I would say the Russian soldiers at this time?
If I may start first, I would like to see Russian soldiers and Russian people discouraged by the Putin's politics. I hope that people will just find a way to get rid of that tyrant. And maybe these sanctions will open their eyes. And of course, it is very hard for them to live under sanctions, but somehow many Russians are now fleeing Russia because they realize that it will probably be a long, miserable period of life for Russians, basically.
Because they are, how long during in 20th century, how they be closed for everything, for music, for maybe except theater, some things, because they are famous for theater stuff. But they are, when they open for the West, it's completely different. They have everything. They have shoppings. They have, the Moscow was like
like in any European cities. Just recently it was.
And that's the young people protest and
so
Russian
I think
people.
Young generation will try to do something, but it's very hard.
Very hard.
You see, this Navalny is in prison, and he was the hope for Russia. And I admire this journalist lady Marina that she showed
on TV. She held up the no war sign. That was beautiful.
This was remarkable, and this gives us all hope. I think that Ukraine will somehow prevail. Ukrainian idea of peace.
Yeah, Ivan, what would be your comment on what's going on in Ukraine and your communication?
At the day it started, it was really, really heartbreaking. I couldn't believe my eyes. It was, I think, around 6 a.m. when I saw the news. I was waking up for classes, and as soon as I saw it, I was like, there's no way, not in this modern society we live in today, that this is happening. So it was really, really heartbreaking knowing what my parents been through and the stories I've heard from a lot of people. So it was for a couple of nights, I was really thinking about it, how difficult it will be for them afterwards, and how it isn't supposed to happen anywhere anymore, and how we didn't learn from history. So it's really, really sad that it happens still, not just in Ukraine, but also other wars around the whole globe, which is really, really sad. But I think the only comment I would say is that nothing ever stays the same, except, as my mother says, only one thing, and that is that the sun always rises. So even though it will be bad afterwards, I think there is going to be something positive from it that will connect the Ukrainian people more, and it will connect the world even together more. So hopefully that will happen.
Annabelle, what would be your comment?
I would like to find a way for us to support the brave Russian people, because I think that's something that didn't happen in the Bosnian War. There were Serbians who were objecting, and they didn't get the support they should have got. And I think if they'd got support, it could be a very different story. And I'm sorry to put a downer here, but I know that there are bad things happening now, and that the Serbian nationalists want to break away and have their own army. And this really troubles me, and we haven't mentioned that. But I do think that if we can support the brave protesters wherever, it's the best thing we can possibly do.
You are right.
Well, good. And just one final question, everyone. I'd like to just hear each of you on your hope for peace in Bosnia, out of everything that you have endured. Going through the war, and Ivan, living and growing up in the aftermath of war. What's the takeaway? What truth have you learned? Your mother, that the sun always rises. What is the one truth that you feel is really important that you would like to share with our global audience today?
So because of the situation that I was raised in the mixed household, it gave me a chance to understand the differences at the same time I was born in. So I managed to understand, okay, there's difference between religion, between culture, but it made me love that even more. It made me love different cultures. It made me love different races, ethnicities, different people. So it made me realize that everybody is almost the same. We go through the same things. Or, for example, with the camps where we work with Vieco and Azra, people from US who come here, it's the same, like when they say how they grew up, what their experiences was, it's almost the same. So it's always just different parts of the world. So what I learned was not to trust anybody but my instincts, and not to trust the people who push their own thoughts into things, except just to love everyone for who they are, not for what their name is, not where they come from, just from who they are.
Lovely.
Beautiful.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I would add also that all these 20 years working for the Friendship Summer Camp, all our activity always one things: peace and love. So we talking about peace every time, because it's so important for us. If we don't have a peace, we will, we will lose our hope, and how we'll manage. So that's a very important belief in peace, and somehow people Ukraine must do same. That's for me.
Maybe my message is something that I'm struggling all my life, is fighting the stereotypes, fighting the prejudice, and embrace good in people. People are wonderful.
Yes.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah, people are wonderful. In spite of themselves at times.
In spite
Look at
Yeah.
our Irving. We love our Irving. Irving is like my child.
Yeah, lovely.
We
I'm so
love
glad
him.
you came.
He's so clever. He's so
Yeah, well, you know,
clever.
even I've been struck by how flawless your English is.
He's now teaching even English, huh? Tell them that.
Yes, so
Tell
I've
us.
been studying English almost my whole life, so it's been a good
Wow.
so far. And I had a good experience or when I was little. I grew up with one of my close friends. He was from US, and I had a chance to practice English with him. So that's the reason I'm on a more higher level than others. So right now and before, I used to teach English for my fellows and my friends. So online currently, I'm still teaching English. So it's just a fun so far, a ride, I would say.
Well, it's a flaw. You have a flawless accent, my friend. I mean, so
Thank
well
you.
done.
Accent, yes.
For a guy in Bosnia to speak like an American, I wouldn't have known the difference had I met you on the street in San Francisco. So, I mean, I want to acknowledge that. I want to acknowledge your mastery of linguistics. So, Annabelle, give us a
appreciate it.
final word. Give us a final word, my dear Annabelle.
Dear Annabelle.
Dear Annabelle.
I love you all so much, and I cannot tell you how much I love the Bosnian people. I've just been bathed in love when I've gone to that country, no matter what was going on. And I shan't stop going until I can't move at all.
Oh my God.
Well,
Yeah.
good. Well, listen, thank you all, Annabelle
Thank
and
you.
Azra
Thank
Thank
and
you.
Vyacheslav
Thank you,
and
Jim.
Ivan.
Thank you, Jim, for making this possible.
Yes,
Yeah.
thank you
Definitely.
all. Well, that brings us to a close today, everyone. It's been a powerful reflection from a part of the world very close to Ukraine, the sacrifices people make, but the heroism that they also embody during these times. And I'm sure there's many similar stories that are going to arise out of the ashes of the Ukrainian turmoil. So thank you for that inspiration. We'll bring this session to a close, and you're all invited to the after chat session. You were sent the link in your emails. There's the chat. If you want to, Ivan, I think people would love to talk
Here it is.
to you
It's
more,
in
and
here.
Azra and Vyoko. The link is in the chat box right here. We have an after chat session where people just informally just get together and they can see each other. This is Zoom webinar, so it's a broadcast, but the next one is Zoom meeting, so everybody can see each other. And I'm sure there'd be active interest
You'll
if
come.
you want to join.
Hungry for more of you.
Okay, everyone. Thank you
Okay.
so
Thank you.
much.
Thank you, Jim.
Love you.
Love you.
Love
We
you
will
too.
see you
Love you.
again on Monday.
See you in
Enjoy your
May.
weekend.
See you in May. Erwin, will you
See
come in
you,
May
see
to
you.
Kozarats, please?
I will bring
I will try.
Irvin. Can I bring Irvin?
Please.
I think you
please.
can.
Please,
Must
please.
come. Please may come. Yeah.
And maybe Jim should come.
I'll think about it. If I'm over that way, I'll definitely join Annabelle. I want to meet Ivan and you, Azra, and hear your stories, and Vyeko. It'd be
Yeah.
a
Well, you
grand
let
dinner
us come.
together.
You come. You'd
Okay,
never
sure.
regret coming to that little conference. It's
Sure.
wonderful.
Okay, everyone. That's it for today. Bye
Bye.
for now. See you Monday.
Bye, Jim.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.
How do we get into the next one?
Що добре, вона перескочила.